This has been a big year for me in movies. Most people assume that because I like video, that I must watch a ton of movies and have some big list of all of my favorites. I honestly don't watch them very much. I've probably seen 8 this whole year, and this is probably the most that I've watched in a few years.
You mean 8, like, at home and in the theaters?
Yes.
Wow.
Like, counting the 2 that we saw together.
Wow.
It's not very much. And I don't hate movies. I'm totally fine with them. As we've talked before, I obsess over all of the production aspects to the point where it makes it hard for me to enjoy it.
Sure.
Like, I'm looking at the scar that the art department painted on the guy's arm and wondering how many hours he had to sit in the chair, or how did they make that fight scene work so that the person didn't get punched for real, or at least not too many times.
Sure.
So one thing that I found interesting about the film industry are film festivals. I've never been to one, but there is a big film festival in France every year called the Cannes Film Festival. And for those of you that don't know, oftentimes big movies will premiere at a festival before you can just go to your local theater and watch it. And I've learned that the Cannes Film Festival has created a new tradition accidentally that I'm very excited to tell you about. Whenever I was in grade school, we would watch movies in my library class every once in a while, and all the kids in my class at the end of a movie, they would just start clapping, and I thought it was the stupidest thing ever because the actors aren't here, right, and the director's not here. No one is here to receive this applause. So if you're at a film festival, you do actually have that. The director's in the front, the main actors are usually there to receive the applause. But what happens when you start getting applause at a movie premiere and it just doesn't stop? So the Cannes Film Festival is notorious for all of the big movies, and even the bad movies, getting minutes upon minutes standing ovations. I'd like to read to you this list from IMDb that I found that ranks movies by how long they're standing ovation.
No way. That sounds like fun to be a part of for just a minute, and then kind of annoying to be a part of for the rest.
I watched a YouTube video of one of these. It's exactly that. All right, here we go. Longest standing ovations at Cannes. And this is not a comprehensive list, but it's got about 30 movies. I'm just going to skip around to movies that people have actually heard of. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. How many minutes of continuous standing ovation do you think that movie got? And this is the one that I watched the ovation for.
Okay. 4 minutes.
7 minutes.
7 minutes. That's wild.
Let's see. The Beaver, starring Mel Gibson. I saw this movie a long time ago. That one had 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness. What? How high are we on the list right now?
That was number 12.
10 minutes is 12th place?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got The Artist, which that won a Best Picture, so it's probably a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
12 minutes. Let's see here. Fahrenheit 9/11. 20.
Oh my goodness.
And number 1 is Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth, which is the one that people kind of say started a lot of this tradition. 22 straight minutes of people standing and cheering at this movie.
After it was over.
Yeah, you could watch a TV show in that time.
That's an episode of Friends. That's a whole episode.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I was wondering, why do they do this? I understand standing ovation. That's great. But why doesn't it stop? And I guess it has to do with the seat chart for the people that watch this movie and who were likely to be sitting in different parts of the theater. So naturally, the director, the producer, the lead actors are in the front row for their premiere. And then you have all the well-to-do celebrities that are kind of in that middle. And then all the journalists who are there for work are stuck in the back. So when they see the cast and crew stand up at the beginning, it's kind of a domino effect. Well, reverse domino, because everyone stands up. And nobody wants this to end. And what I've learned is that if the cast and crew doesn't say something, it just keeps going until they tell it to stop.
Wow.
So it becomes this weird psychology game of you look to the people in front of you and you don't want to be the one who sits down early and gets ridiculed. So you just have to wait for Harrison Ford at the Indiana Jones premiere to say, all right, guys. And then he walks over to the podium and it finally stops.
That's crazy. So literally the etiquette at this point is to just clap. Keep going.
Clap and
until
cheer.
Someone says, stop doing that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name is Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys. So for some reason, I've been thinking about Chuck E. Cheese a lot lately. You ever go to Chuck E. Cheese before?
Maybe once.
I think I've only been like once or twice in my whole life, but I do have memories of it. And then I'm listening to this book right now. It's by Will Wheaton. You know who Will Wheaton is?
Yeah.
Okay. He's famous for like Star Trek, and then he's whatever. He's a bunch of things, right? He's more famous for more things now, but mostly like Star Trek was his big thing when he was young. But the reason I know who Will Wheaton is because he's the narrator of my favorite audiobook, Ready Player One. That's the only reason I care about Will Wheaton, if we're being honest. But I'm interested in him enough that he had an audiobook that came out. It's called Still Just a Geek. It's a revisit of his memoir he wrote in 2001, where he like annotates this thing he wrote 20 years ago, right? So I've been listening to that. And he mentioned just casually, have you heard about the background of Chuck E. Cheese? And I was like, that's interesting. But he didn't talk about it. And so I kind of wanted to think about it. I wanted to look it up.
Sure.
And it's interesting enough that I kind of thought I had to share it with all of you. So I've been to Chuck E. Cheese before, like I said. I don't know how long ago. I would say it was probably at least 15 years ago, probably more like 20.
Yeah.
Because I'm almost 30 now, so 15, it'd be weird if it was only 15
Yes, I was going to say
ago.
15. I sure hope it was
It's probably
more.
20 years ago. And I don't know if you remember from your experiences, but 20 years ago at a Chuck E. Cheese, the experience was somewhat like you got to see these robot stuffed animals essentially play music, and you got to eat pizza that I even remember then thought tasted like cardboard, and you got to play games at an arcade. And I didn't really play games at arcades very much, so it was fun, right? I enjoyed the time. I still remember it, but that's pretty much my experience with it. And just recently I've read that Chuck E. Cheese all over are closing, and for whatever reason, I don't really know why, but it just kind of made sense that this would get brought up in the book. So I learned that Chuck E. Cheese opened in 1977, which is, I don't know if it's before or after I thought it would have, but that's when it happened.
Yeah, Star Wars and Chuck E. Cheese. What a great year.
That's right. But get this. This was crazy. The creator of Chuck E. Cheese, the thought person who started it, also co-created the Atari, which is crazy because I think his idea was like, oh, video games are important, and let's create this whole new entertainment thing where you can come and eat and be entertained and then play video games, right?
Yeah.
So creator of Atari, owner of Pong, like all this stuff, kind of a big thing. So for the first 3 years of the Chuck E. Cheese existence, it was called like, it's funny that out of all the things I wrote down, I didn't write down this, but it was called like Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Party. Like it wasn't just called Chuck E. Cheese. And in 1977 up to like 80, they were owned by Atari. Like their parent company was Atari, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
That's like a random connection.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So what's funny is this guy, his name's Nolan Bushnell, is the one who created.
Yeah,
and
I've heard of
opened-
him.
Yeah, he's the guy who works for Atari, opened Chuck E. Cheese. So how it started was he was at this conference for people who are like owners and workers at amusement parks and like theme environment type things, right? He was at a conference for that, and he saw this crazy coyote costume, and he thought, I'm going to buy that costume and use that as a mascot for my pizza restaurant that's going to open up, because he thought coyotes and pizza, what better marketing could there be, right? So he orders this costume at this conference, and he goes back home, and when the costume comes in, it's not a coyote. And various sources say various things. I'm not sure if he ordered the wrong thing or if they sent the wrong thing, right? But what comes in the mail is this fluffy pink-tailed rat costume, okay? And he's like, he's a businessman. He understands. That's no big deal. We'll just call it Rick Rat's Pizza. It's not. I'm not stuck to the coyote thing, and so he brings it to his team. They're like, "Here's the thing: people don't want to eat at a pizza restaurant that's associated with rats.
No.
That's ridiculous. Rats are kind of not clean. We're not going to do that." And so they kind of work with the costume. I think they probably already put in some research and development into this rat idea since they had this, and he's already got people working on the animatronics, right? Because that's like this idea he really cares about. And so he's like, "Well, let's just do a mouse. We'll make it a mouse." So that's how Chuck E. Cheese is birthed. It's supposed to be a coyote, doesn't end up being a coyote, ends up being a rat. Rats aren't marketable. Let's make it a mouse.
Right. Mickey Mouse, very marketable.
That's
Mickey
right.
Rat would not have gotten off the ground.
No, it wouldn't have. So they just went ahead and they came up with the name Chuck E. Cheese. And as I always do when I'm looking into this stuff, just like everyone does, when you like research a topic, you fall into all these little rabbit holes. And so I was looking up like what happened to the animatronics in old Chuck E. Cheese's, right? Because they have to go somewhere. Like, is there people out there? Well, it turns out there are people out there who look for them and buy them and restore them and create other things out of them, right? So I found this article. It was basically all about where some of these things have ended up. But get this. This is what's crazy. Small world, I guess. It wasn't like an article about Chuck E. Cheese or anything other than about their animatronics. It was on like an IT website forum. And a guy who commented on this article happened to be the person who was commissioned to create the first prototype for the animatronic animals, right? And he had this whole story about how much fun it was to work with all these people. It's just crazy, right?
Yeah.
So fascinating. And I can link that if you want to see it. I don't know if anyone cares about that, but I've got a link for it. And so that's just crazy, right? But so the point of the thing, right, is we're going to have entertainment in Chuck E. Cheese. We're going to have the mouse. We're going to have the band. They're going to play music. It's going to be this whole thing. And it goes on, and through the years, Chuck E. Cheese takes off in popularity. They have all kinds of campaigns, whatever. But eventually they realize, okay, and you'll understand if you look at the mascot from then, even though it's a mouse, it's better than a rat, it's not good, right? So they decide we're going to change him, make him a little more friendly. We're going to kind of re-up the marketing for Chuck E. Cheese. So in 1994, the year of my birth, they start to kind of upgrade Chuck E. Cheese a little bit. And so I guess with that comes other changes. And so in 94, that's when that kind of happens. But more things start to happen. And over the course of 40 years of operation, in 2012, they've decided, after all this successful stuff we've had, now we need to create a backstory for our mascot.
Oh, really?
That's when they decide that it's important enough, right? Doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what they do. And here's where it gets more interesting, right? Because Chuck E. Cheese is an interesting place, and like they have since, I think like 5 years ago, they like disbanded the animatronics. They're like getting rid of all that stuff. So there's another, again, in my side quests, I discovered a bunch of people who are like keeping up with all the restaurants that they can still go to that have animatronic bands, and they'll like travel around and go see them. These are adults, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so that's kind of happened, and everything's kind of changing. But this is where it really gets interesting, because the backstory of Chuck E. Cheese is kind of dark. And it's like, when you read it, you think it's like an internet thing someone created.
Like a creepypasta?
Right. It's not. It's a real story. And there's been interviews that people have done with Chuck E. Cheese about like, hey, where did this come from? And they're like, oh, this was never official marketing material on our website. This isn't real, whatever. But like in 2012, this was published on Chuck E. Cheese website as the background of someone we now know is named Charles Entertainment Cheese. Okay. And this is what's crazy. This is what I couldn't believe. I think this is what Will Wheaton was like alluding to in his book. That's pretty crazy. So Chuck E. Cheese, Charles Entertainment Cheese, was an orphan. Didn't know his parents, and he lived in Saint Marinara Orphanage. And he didn't know his parents. He had no family, had no ties to his family, didn't know when his birthday was. And if you know anything about Chuck E. Cheese, they make a big deal about birthdays, right? He didn't know when his birthday was, but for some reason was infatuated with the song Happy Birthday. He would think about it. He would sing it. He was always thinking about it. And he took it upon himself that since he didn't know when his birthday was, he knew what it would feel like if someone would just celebrate his birthday with him. He wanted others to be able to feel what he had never felt. So he was passionate about happy birthday so much that he would throw birthday parties, sing happy birthday for all the other kids in the orphanage because he himself had no idea when his own birthday was, right? Crazy. And so this is kind of his thing. He lives in St. Marinero Orphanage this whole time. He makes all these other kids happy with happy birthday. He's a really good mouse. Well, he kind of gets too old for this circumstance to live in an orphanage.
Quick question.
Sure.
Is he living with kids or with other mice?
Now, this is something I'm going to go with mice.
Okay.
But that's something I don't know because as we continue on in the story, we're not dealing with mice anymore. Okay. So maybe it's kids. And maybe that's why he didn't get a home or a family, is because he was a mouse and they were children. I don't really know. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry for derailing.
And again, this is an ebook that was published. It's 12 pages. It was published on their website. I can link that too.
Oh my god.
It's still out there. And this, just so you know, I'm not making this stuff up. It's in the ebook. Okay. I read the ebook. I couldn't believe it. So Chuck loves happy birthday and he loves singing. Right. And so that's another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning. He loves to sing. He loves music. When he's not throwing a birthday party, he's singing something because music is his passion as well as happy birthday. Really singing happy birthday is what it is. Right. But as he gets older, he also has interest in video games and specific interest in the game Pong.
Oh.
And so Charles Entertainment Cheese gets the opportunity to compete in a Pong tournament, which he wins. And he wins a grand prize of $50 in that tournament, which is enough for him to buy a ticket to move to New York City because he wants to go to the big city and live like a mouse should live in the big city. So he packs up his things, he takes his $50 and he moves to New York City. He has no friends, no family, doesn't know where to go, and he ends up sleeping above a pizza parlor. And he lives up above this pizza parlor. He doesn't know the people, but he knows the comings and goings of the place. He knows what time it opens and what time they prepare and when the cook leaves and everything. And so after a while, he finally gets up the courage and he decides to go inside and check out the pizza parlor after the chef has gone home. The chef's name is Pasquale. Okay. And I don't know, I think that's how you pronounce it. I looked up pronunciation. It's Italian. But this is Chef Pasquale, right? And he makes the pizzas. They think he's gone. So Chuck thinks he's gone. He heads downstairs to look at the pizza restaurant, and he's amazed by everything he sees. But to his disappointment, he was wrong, and Chef Pasquale is there, and he yells, "Mouse," and grabs a rolling pin and chases him around the building. And they finally get to a corner where Chuck is cornered and doesn't know what to do and realizes that his life is about to end. The chef is about to kill him. And so he does the only thing he can think of and just starts to sing.
Happy birthday?
I can only assume. And singing is what saves Chuck's life because the pizza chef hears him and says, "I can use this. You're the best voice I've ever heard. I can use this in my business. We can bring people in with your talent." So he goes from trying to kill him to exploiting him to work for him, right? And so now Chuck is the singer at the restaurant, brings more people in. And it kind of ends happy because, well, you can read the book, but basically it ends where they work together, right? And the lore continues after this book because Chef Pasquale ends up being the drummer in the animatronic band for Chuck E. Cheese. And it's kind of really interesting because Chuck seemed like this great guy. He cared about all these people, loved his friends, wanted to sing, wanted to make their day better. And then when he's looking around this pizza restaurant, he starts to get exploited by a chef, right? And I can only assume that went however it went. It had probably worked for a while. But it seems like somewhere along the line, the darkness just kept coming because now it seems like Charles Entertainment Cheese is exploiting Chef Pasquale to work for him.
Yeah.
So this isn't... I tell you this whole story to say Chuck E. Cheese still exists. This is not an ad for Chuck E. Cheese, nor is it a negative thing for them.
But imagine if this was an ad.
Yeah. And feel free if you'd like, if there's anyone out there listening, we'll talk about Chuck E. Cheese for money. But maybe not after what I'm about to say. I don't know. I'm not telling you not to go to Chuck E. Cheese. I would never do that. But I am telling you the next time I get pizza, I'm not going to Chuck E. Cheese.
we're getting right into things today. No 5-minute preamble to guess what I'm going to talk about. Today I'm talking about 2 of the oldest jokes in recorded history. Which one do you want to hear first? Do you want to hear the guy walks into a bar joke or the fart joke?
Fart joke.
Oh man, I was hoping you'd do it the way around. So, let me scroll down here. So this fart joke. Something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman who did not fart in her husband's lap. That was written on a tablet 5,000 years ago.
No way.
The ancient Sumerians came up with that fart joke.
5,000 years ago.
Yes.
That's insane.
Absolutely. So let me tell you about the other joke now. The guy walks into a bar, or should I say a dog walks into a bar. So around 1900, archaeologists found these jokes on different tablets that were in the ruined city of Nippur, which is in modern-day Iraq. And the other joke, this is a fairly literal translation here. A dog walked into a tavern and said, "I can't see a thing. I'll open this one." Do you get it?
No.
That's the problem. Nobody gets this joke. And there is so much discourse online. Like that fart joke, like it's old, it's a little clunky, but it's like you at least get the joke there. But like, what is this dog doing? Why can't he see you? What is this one?
And what do they open?
Yeah, exactly. So I read through so many theories online about this joke. And like some people think that there's some sort of cultural context we're not getting. Like maybe the "I'll open this one" was a reference to something in their culture that like maybe some famous person said that we just don't know. Sure. Or some people thought that there's some sort of non-verbal gesture that like maybe you did something pantomimed with your hands at a certain point in the punchline and like that made it funny. And then there was some person who thought it was maybe like an anti-joke where, you know, when people say like a guy walks into a bar and breaks his collarbone.
Right.
Like maybe it's like the dog walked into the bar and his eyes were closed and that's why he couldn't see anything and that's why he went in. But like, I still don't think that is it. But I found one theory that I think, at least I want to believe that it is true. And if so, it kind of makes it funny. I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson to how we got to here, though. So the archaeologists find these jokes on stone tablets, and they know that they are from ancient Sumeria, but what they're able to realize from where they're found is that they weren't written by Sumerians. They were written by Babylonians, and the Babylonians would have came about 1,000 years after the Sumerians. But since they were both kind of founded in modern-day Iraq area, the Babylonians actually inherited some of the writing system from the Sumerians in the same way that, like, you and I know a little bit of Latin, whether or not we can't really speak it, but we're familiar with a few Latin quotes here and there. So the scribes would use the Sumerian written language that was known as cuneiform, and they would use this language and they would use it for writing, and even though like it wasn't really their main language. So they would find these tablets when they were excavating. They would find a set of 2 tablets. One that has these very tiny, very well-written strokes in the language, and then they would find one next to it that had pretty much the same thing, but significantly larger. And this is what their teenage scribes used in order to train. So it's kind of like the Bart Simpson writing the "I will not do this, I will not do this," but in the form of these clay tablets from 5,000 years ago. So what they were able to kind of learn is that by analyzing everything that came around this joke is that these were big compilations of proverbs. And a proverb is like some sort of little nugget of truth sort of thing. And while there's nothing that explicitly says this one was meant to be a joke, based on reading the other ones, that they're able to tell that like there was some sort of humorous intent that was made with it. And since this language was somewhat of a dead language at the time to the Babylonians, they don't get the joke either. Like, they're just doing this to practice writing a thing down. So even for them, they don't totally understand it because they're missing the context of where to even start with it. So let's start with the dog. In Sumerian culture, the dog represents a human of a certain type of job. All the animals back then, they would be assigned to like a job when it came to like metaphors and trying to represent people. So a dog is considered to be like the security guard of their culture. So he's known for being kind of like a rough character that you don't want to mess with, probably guarding something, which it's kind of like a dog today. They're known for guarding things fairly well. So if the dog is meant to be kind of like a bouncer, if the dog walks into the bar, he's not doing his job. He can't guard people from getting in if he's in the bar himself. So the next part, he says, I can't see a thing. With the way the weather and like how sunny that part of the world is, it would have been very, very bright outside. And then you're walking into this bar and it's very, very dark. So he walks in and his eyes aren't adjusting to the difference in the brightness in the areas. But the problem is that when he says, I'll open this one, I've read articles from multiple people that study Sumerology, as they call it, and they think that this one is a reference to the door. And why is it important that he is opening the door? It's because back then, taverns and bars were known for being very multi-purpose. You might go there for food or drink, but you might also go there because it's also a brothel. And why might one of these bars hire a guard, but to make sure that people don't see what they're not supposed to see? So if the dog, who's supposed to keep this building shut and no one around that's not supposed to be there, if he walks in, he's not guarding the door, and then opens the door, anybody can just walk by and see things happening with people around town that they would rather not have known to the public. So I think the joke is that he's just doing a bad job and ruining someone's political career. It's so bizarre.
That is bizarre.
So I want to get back to the fart joke, though. When I was learning about the fart joke, I was able to find some people online who have found a way to ruin all the fun of jokes by meticulously dissecting them and analyzing what makes a joke funny. And they've came up with this concept known as the benign violation theory. And the benign violation theory basically decides if you hear something and you think it's funny or you think it's not funny. So the idea is that with the benign violation theory, in order for a joke to be funny, it has to strike the right balance of violating a social norm, but not violating it too far, which is where the benign part comes in. The idea is that if it's too much of a violation, the person is not going to think it's funny because they're offended. But if it's too benign, it's just not funny enough to even be worth laughing about. So if we want to take the fart joke and maybe we make it too benign, instead of it being about like farting on the husband's lap, if it was about like tickling or something, you would say like, well, that's not that funny. Like, it's not worth laughing about. But if you went the opposite direction and you said like the woman murdering her husband,
Right.
like that's too far
Right.
to the point where like it's too extreme for the situation. And one of the big things they learned about the benign violation theory is that this is not a universal thing. This changes from person to person. So I could tell this joke to you and you might find it funny. But if I told it to now deceased actor Ernest Borgnine, I guarantee you he would not find it funny. Ernest Borgnine was known for being in a lot of movies and TV shows over the years, but the one that I know him from is he was the voice and likeness of Mermaid Man from SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay. And in one of his 5 marriages, he got married to a woman, and they argued a lot in the first few weeks, and she divorced him when they were lying in bed, and he farted under the covers and held her underneath, which is colloquially known as a Dutch oven.
Dutch oven, yes. I know that.
So if I told Ernest Borgnine this joke about like a wife farting and the husband, he probably isn't going to think this funny. He's going to be like, man, that's too soon. That's too far. And I feel like this just perfectly illustrates that it's really hard to tell jokes, and you really need to know your audience in order to have a joke land, and this is why comedy is so hard. So I feel like the fart joke is kind of that perfect balance between too benign, not too much of a violation. Like, it smells, there's an auditory response to it, it's unexpected, but like it goes away, no one's really being damaged or hurt from it. And I feel like that is the reason why 5,000 years later, we are still laughing at fart jokes.
I'm glad we are.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. Just as a reminder, we've got our next listener episode coming up here soon, so send us those emails. If you have anything that you want to learn more about but don't want to do any research, we will do all that research for you. Just send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com. I also wanted to announce that our next episode may be having a bit of a spooky theme to it.
And as always, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.